What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Elden Ring build guide. This time we have the Arctic Avenger and a level 150 NG plus 3 build. This is pretty much my version of the Blade build. This is how I would play if I was playing as Blade. Alright, so we are using his armor set and his weapon here. We are at a heavy load, but I'll explain that soon. Anyways, let's get into the stats first. Vigor is at 60 as you are supposed to be taking damage, and this is NG plus 3 and you do not have any defensive incantations at your disposal, so this is the main reason. Mine is at 15. You don't not need a lot of mana for this build. Most of your spells do not cost a lot of FP. Endurance is at 20 just to make sure you can carry everything. Strength is at 50 as this is a strength and intelligence build. As you can see, our weapons scales with strength and intelligence at C for both of them. Dexterity is at 18. It is a requirement for this weapon. That's the only reason. Intelligence is at 50. Again, this is intelligence / strength build. Faith and arcane are by default. Let's get into the items. The Royal Greatsword is at plus 10. Demi-Human Queen Staff plus 25. We have the attribute scaling C for strength and S for intelligence. Really is the best one you can use. Does not require a lot of intelligence to use as well, even though it's not really a problem for us. We're using his whole armor set here. Alright, so you can switch this one out with, I believe, the Ronin, which is right here. If you do that, you can then be at a medium equip load. However, if you would like to keep where did they go? There they are. Then you will have to change this. Anyways, let's get into the talismans. Great Jar's Arsenal is a must. You don't have a lot of endurance to equip everything you are having, so you will have to use this. This one, if you do not want to be at a heavy load, you can go for Radagon's Sword Seal. And you'll receive more damage, but you have a bit more health. However, I personally prefer going for the Erdtree's Favor plus 2, as that helps a lot more in my opinion in the long run, and go for Ronin's legs or whatever they were called. The Green Turtle Talisman, as you can see here, it's very useful on most of my builds. You can switch this out with anything you would like. Anything. Like you can go for another defensive talisman. You can go for Shard of Alexander is what I was using when I am not using it, to be honest, because I do use my Ash of War quite a lot here. And that's about it. I mean, you can go for any of these. Magic Scorpion Charm. There are a few options there if you really want to, increase your damage. Maybe the Claw Talisman or the Axe Talisman, depending if you are using a lot of jump attacks or not. And that's about it, guys. Anyways, as you can see, and of course here we have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, just to reduce damage. You are supposed to be somewhat tanky. In here, you can change those. You do not need to have the Cerulean Hidden Tier. Actually, let's get into this now. Alright, we'll go into the spells and this. So this one, I was just trying things out. This is what I would go for, Opaline Heart Tier. And this one, either Magic Shrouding Crack Tier, keep it the way it is. Or you can go for anything else here, honestly. Anything you want, maybe Strength Knot or Intelligence Knot, depending on if you're using more spells or if you are using more melee attacks. Or I would go for the Stone Barbed Crack Tier. If you are two-handing your weapon, you will get quite a lot of stance breaks, especially while using your Ash of War as well. Now we will go into the spells real quick. So of course, Terra Magica, you'll only be using that in the beginning of a fight usually, and then you cast Carrion Phalanx. You can change that with the Great Blade Phalanx if you want, but this costs way less and you do not have a lot of FP. Same idea here, you can go for Loretta's Mastery, but the Great Bow costs less. And you're using mainly almost all of the frost spells or sorceries. So This is very important, doesn't cost a lot. This one as well. And this. Of course, the freezing mist you don't really need here, but you can use it in some situations. It will help, but it's not necessary. I don't think I ever used it, maybe once. And that's about it, guys. Margit, the Fellow. So guys, the resistances at the bottom where it says 3, 4, 7, 11 for the status afflictions, those are in the hundreds. The I stands for immune, and for recommended abilities, as you saw on the bottom, you go for Loretta's Great Bow when you are far away from him. Of course, Carrion Phalanx is pretty useful as well. However, personally speaking, I mainly used my melee attacks, combined it with, of course, your Wolf's Assault Ash of War, and I would recommend, of course, using your Frost sorceries, as his resistances are pretty weak across the board. Godrick, the Grafted. I'm not going to go over his resistances, but if you do have any questions, you can ask me in the comments below. However, as you can see, for the recommended abilities, we are using almost everything we have at our disposal. When he's far, of course, Loretta's Great Bow is always useful. And Carrion Phalanx, you cast that before using Loretta's Great Bow. And when he gets close enough, you go for the Glinston Ice Crag, and then mix it in with some melee attacks in your Ash of War. Now, Adula's Moonblade, make sure you're close to the target and you strike them with the blade for a quick stance break. Other than that, guys, you can fight him however you would like. Renalla, Queen of the Full Moon. For her elemental resistances, whatever is in between parentheses is for her second phase, and for her status affliction resistances, whatever is at the bottom is for phase 1 and the numbers at the top are for phase 2. However, as you may see, she is very weak against physical damage, so utilize your melee attacks as often as you can. As you can see, I tried attacking her while she was in the bubble, however, didn't work out, was a waste of time. And do use Zamer's Ice Storm here, it does help quite a bit. For phase 2, you should go for your Frost sorceries, to be honest. Do not use Carrion Phalanx, do not use Loretta's Great Bow, because her magic resistances are pretty high at 80%. So she will negate 80% of your damage, meaning only 20% of your damage, your magic damage, will be going through. This is why I went for melee attacks. And of course, Wolf's Assault is really nice because she is a small target. As you can see, while I flip in the air, I push her back and I can chain lock it until she's dead. Star Scourge Radahn. As you can see, guys, his main resistance is against holy damage, so using anything else against him all works. Of course, we will always use the same tactic, which is to attack him from far away with Loretta's Great Bow until he gets close enough for Glinston's Ice Crag, and then of course we switch to your melee attacks and Wolf's Assault, and you would deal pretty good damage to him just doing that. As you can see, we almost kill him before he gets to second phase. However, unfortunately, it didn't work out, but I will finish him off right now. Morgott, the Omen King. One of the most annoying bosses, honestly. I've always hated this boss fight. I do not know the mechanics as well as I do, let's say, against Malenia or even Malekith or any of those endgame bosses. I am not sure what the reason is, but regardless though, he's not that hard. So again, you want to start up the fight by using the same rotation. Go for your Carrion Phalanx, Loretta's Great Bow until he gets close enough, and then you go for the Glinston Ice Crag, and then you can switch to, of course, your melee attacks. Now, you do not have to go for Loretta's Great Bow the way I just did, but I already proc Frostbite, so I thought, why not? The Fire Giant. Well, this guy has zero resistances against magic damage, so you want to go for that, and this build utilizes magic damage pretty well. Now his status afflictions resistances are pretty high, but it's not a big deal. You can easily inflict frostbite on him if you use Zamer's Ice Storm. Keep that in mind. But in first phase, you probably just want to rely on your melee attacks as much as possible and mix it in with your Wolf's Assault to deal pretty decent damage. And that's what I did until I got into phase 2, where I took it a bit more seriously. For his second phase, aim for his hand, just don't miss like I just did there with the initial part of my Ash of War, and then just stick under him as much as possible. I personally would recommend going for Zamer's Ice Storm until you proc Frostbite, and then you go for your Ash of War, mix it in with some melee attacks, and a Duelist Moonblade is pretty decent here as well. So just keep using all the spells, you know, situationally depending on the situation you are in, and you should be fine. The Godskin Duo. The only difference between the resistances is the Noble, the big one right here, has 35% damage negation against striking damage, while the Apostle, the smaller one, has only 10%. So if you are using striking weapons, make sure you try to deal as much damage to the Apostle if you're trying to deal as much damage as possible. When the Noble here goes for the rolling attack, make sure you either go for a Duelist Moonblade, as it does usually end up hitting both targets, or you can also go for Zamer's Ice Storm while taking cover behind the pillars, making sure they cannot hit you while you can hit them. Whenever they are alone, I usually switch to melee attacks and mix it in with Wolf's Assault. Those usually perform pretty well. In addition to using a Duelist Moonblade, you can fully charge Zamer's Ice Storm, as I am doing here whenever the Noble goes for his rolling attack, and charging it up fully 3 times will guarantee you a stance break and a quick finish. Dragonlord plus Citisex. This guy is insane. He has massive damage negations across the board. He does not mess around. Regardless though, you do want to use your frost sorceries and try to go for that frost proc as often as possible. The frostbite will increase your damage quite a bit, so whenever that happens, you can switch to your melee attacks if you want to save your FP and feel like, you know, you're not wasting it. Then that's what I would do. That way you can carry more Crimson Flasks as well. And just as a reminder, whenever you are spamming a Duelist Moonblade, make sure you are close to the target if you want to stance break it. Here, when it lies stance broken, attack his head before you go for the critical hit for additional damage. And as Dragonlord plus Citisex tries to recover from being stance broken, you do get a chance here where you can utilize your Wolf's Assault, then always try to get behind him or to his sides whenever you can, get as close as possible, and go for a fully charged Zamer's Ice Storm. Combine that with the Duelist Moonblade and your Ash of War, you should be dealing pretty decent damage against him. Of course, again, whenever you get that Frostbite proc, that's when you go for your melee attacks. As you can see here, I did not get the Frostbite proc, however, your weapon is a colossal weapon, and if you fully charge up your attacks, you can get quite a lot of stance breaks. Malekith, the Black Blade. This guy also has lots of resistances, but apparently doesn't have lots of health, unlike the Fire Giant and Dragonlord Placidusax. As you can see guys, first phase, you probably want to use your melee attacks as much as possible and save your mana or your FP for second phase. However, you can always start up the fight with Carrion Phalanx and Loretta's Great Bow. Here, after you stance break him and go for the critical hit, fully charge Zamar's Ice Storm and try to avoid his attack. Now I have to admit that Malekith is probably one of my favorite boss fights in the entire game, along with Star Scourge Radahn. So, the best way to approach this fight is to go for your melee attacks whenever you have small openings, and you can also depend on Adula's Moonblade when the opportunity presents itself, as you can cast that pretty quickly. And of course, if you get the chance to go for Zamar's Ice Storm, I personally would do that. Just do not fully charge it, because you probably will not be able to, as he will most likely attack you and interrupt you before doing so. Mohg, Lord of Blood. This guy has been one of the easiest boss fights for me. Of course, you always want to start this boss fight by casting Carrion Phalanx and then fully charging Loretta's Great Bow at least twice before he gets close enough to you for you to deal some melee damage. Of course, you do want to try being as aggressive as possible if you want to gain those stance breaks. Fully charge Zamar's Ice Storm, go for your Ash of War, fully charge your attacks, use a lot of jump attacks, and whenever you go for Adula's Moonblade, never forget to stand close to the target and try to strike them with the blade as well if you want to gain those quick stance breaks again. Whenever Mohg phase transitions, you probably want to fully charge Zamar's Ice Storm first and then spam your Ash of War. Or you can spam your Ash of War and then fully charge Zamar's Ice Storm. Both ways work, and that will also help you get a pretty fast Frostbite proc. And even though this is a strength build that utilizes quite a bit of sorceries, it does not mean that you are squishy. You can tank quite a lot of damage, so do not be afraid of being aggressive, and always use Loretta's Great Bow. Deals pretty decent poison damage, especially if you charge it up whenever Mohg is far enough for you to do so, and when he gets close again, remain as aggressive as you can. Doing so, mixing it in with probably some Zamar's Ice Storms, if you can fully charge them up, will guarantee you also more stance breaks. Now this is not Crucible Beast the stance breaker, regardless though, because you are using a colossal weapon that deals pretty decent poison damage, you will be gaining a lot of stance breaks as long as you remain aggressive. Loretta, Knight of the Halig Tree. As you can see guys, her resistances are 40% against magic and fire, so try avoiding using those unless you have an overpowered build. that would still do pretty massive damage despite her damage negations. And because of that, of course, you do not want to use Loretta's Great Bow or Carrion Phalanx here. Probably will feel like a waste of FP. Therefore, you should utilize your melee attacks as much as possible, and as you can see here, when you use your Ash of War, you can push her back only after she has been stance broken, but the second part, that can push her back no matter what and will interrupt her attacks. Malenia, Blade of Mikola. As you can see from her resistances, Frostbite is her lowest and fire damage as well, but we do not utilize that, not fire damage, so use Zamer's Ice Storm as much as possible. It will guarantee you a Frostbite proc if you time it properly. Now, she does have quite a large health pool, so do depend on your melee attacks as much as you can when she is frostbitten. Do not waste your FP casting frost sorceries after you proc the frostbite. So whenever she enters her second phase, make sure you spam Glintstone Ice Crag in the beginning whenever she goes for the Scarlet Ionia incantation. And whenever you get the chance, of course, do go for Wolf's Assault here. It does help out quite a bit, but you have to be extra careful. Since we are in NG +4, she deals quite a lot of damage, so you must proceed with caution and rely on your melee attacks, guys, quite a lot. This is a long battle. If you rely on your sorceries most of the time, you will probably end up running out of FP before you get to kill her. Sir Gideon, the All-Knowing. Now, I don't know what's wrong with his resistances. I took all this information from Fexer Life, like his lightning resistance is at 1. I'm not sure what's going on there, if there's a mistake or something, but as you can see, This is my fastest kill against him using a colossal weapon. Godfrey, first Elden Lord. So he does have different resistances. Again, same thing that I did with Renalla. The ones in parentheses are for the second phase. Anyways, you all saw how I initiated the fight. Of course, my favorite way with using carrying phalanx and then going for Loretta's great bow, and then of course dealing melee damage as soon as he gets close enough. And here I do use Adula's Moonblade a bit more than I thought I would, even though you should probably be using Zamer's Ice Storm a lot more often than I did, just to get those quick frostbite procs. And if you are close enough again guys to the target when you are using Adula's Moonblade, you will be able to deal a lot more poise damage. So always try to remember to do that. It's not really a sorcery that was designed for you to cast it from afar. And as you can see, you always want to depend on your sword in every single fight. Your melee attacks are really important in this build. This is a strength and intelligence build. It's not a caster build obviously, but you can cast. You are not a full-on mage, but you do have some powers. And when you use Waltz Assault, make sure you time it properly so you do not end up getting countered like I just did. Radagon of the Golden Order. As you can see guys, again this guy, like most bosses, has pretty high resistances against holy damage. Good thing for us that we are not utilizing any of those holy incantations in this build, so you don't have to worry too much. Just go for that frostbite procs as often as you can, and do try to, of course as usual, utilize your melee damage. Smack him with your colossal sword. If you want to go for stance breaks, remain aggressive of course as well, and eventually you should be able to stance break him quite faster than most other builds that I've tried, at least. Not the stance breaker though, not Crucifix, that was a different story. Here though, you can have a really nice strength / intelligence build that deals massive damage when you cast sorceries or when you go for your melee attacks. The Elden Beast. This guy of course also has massive resistances across the board except against melee damage, so that is what I will do. He is immune to frostbite, and you probably do not want to waste your mana on carrying phalanx or Loretta's great bow. Unless he's really far, then you can go for Loretta's great bow. Regardless though, as you can see here, it barely did damage to him. The carrying phalanx, less than 200 I believe. And using Wolf's Assault is actually your best bet here, and going for jump attacks, mixing it in with some charged attacks is your safest bet. So as you can see guys, this is the Glide build, or the Arctic Avenger, which is pretty much how I would envision Glide. And just as a reminder, you want to make sure that you are always two-handing your weapon. Now I didn't do that initially because I did want to experiment a bit with my sorceries just to see how much damage I can get, but here as you can see, I finally realized that going for melee damage is my best bet here. Going for Waltz Assault, even though you're not going to get the Frostbite proc, it still deals pretty decent damage and it is a good distance closer. So in conclusion guys, this is the best strength intelligence build that I have come up with so far, even though it's pretty hard to make intelligence and strength work together, unlike faith and strength. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching the Arctic Avenger. This will be the end of this episode, and I'll catch you all next time.